button, okay. Hello everyone, again. We're collecting extra magazines and 2026 calendars to deliver to the Trenton Area Soup Kitchen, who will distribute them to their clients. There are collection boxes under the coat racks, and that collection continues into January. Our speaker today, Reverend Charlie Dietrich, was a longtime member of this congregation, serving many years on the worship committee. In 2005, he left for the West Coast, attending Starr King School for the Ministry, interning in New Orleans, and then serving congregations in southern New Jersey, Norfolk, Virginia, and Erie, Pennsylvania. In his retirement, he still works with the Unitarian Universalist Trauma Response Ministry. Please give him our warmest welcome, UUCP welcome.
Thank you very much. Our call to worship today is adapted from a poem called "In Times of Disillusion," written after the First World War as the Universalist movement was fading and totalitarian regimes were growing. The Reverend Clarence Skinner, Dean of Crane Theological School and Universalist theologian, wrote, "Fair hopes did blossom for a flaming hour, and they were radiant. The candle that so lightly illumined has sputtered and gone out. The house where we held rendezvous with hope is dark. The dream is gone. The dreamers go in sad disarray to disillusionment. Therefore I dream. I'll light the candle yet again, illumine the dark forsaken house, bring back the folks who thrilled at glimpses of a fairer world. Therefore I will live communicate with hope. I light the candle and I dream." And so this will be our morning's chalice lighting. I'll light the candle yet again, illumine the dark forsaken house, bring back the folks who thrilled at glimpses of a fairer world. I will live communicate with hope. I light the candle and I dream.
Now, let us give our unison affirmation, which is printed in your order of service. This is a congregation of open minds, of helping hands, and of loving hearts. Together, we care for our earth and work for friendship and peace in the world. Many years ago, when I graduated from college, I was the manager of a Blimpies sandwich shop, where the owner was a man named Mark. I was friends with Mark, but I was also afraid of him because Mark sometimes flew into rages in which he screamed at employees and had major tantrums. I remember one time in particular when I was in the back room with a couple of other employees, and Mark came in, furious about something, and began throwing these gigantic 5-pound tuna cans around, screaming at everyone. It was a very scary moment, and I didn't know what to do. I just told my fellow employees to keep away from him and to literally keep their heads down and keep working. When I look back, I wish that I had calmly told Mark to stop. In that moment, someone needed to step in, and instead of doing that, I opted to hide out. Mark remained a friend, and I realized even then that he had his own demons. But while I didn't have the courage to stand up to him in that moment, I did finally quit for an unpaid internship at a small newspaper in Manhattan. When I gave my notice, Mark told me I was making a big mistake, presumably because I was leaving a promising career at Blimpies. But I knew I was making the right move. That was my first small and extremely mild exposure to an autocrat, a leader with absolute power. The bad news is that real autocrats are literally taking over the world. The 2025 Varieties of Democracy report found that the world has fewer democracies than autocracies, that freedom of expression is worsening in 44 countries, and that 3.1 billion people live in autocracies. The report found that most of this is occurring in Eastern Europe and South and Central Asia, but that Europe and North America are not immune. Many of us have seen the signs. An Asian American friend who lives in Manhattan tells me that she and every person of color she knows make sure they're carrying ID because they fear they will be detained. Families in Trenton are being torn apart when loved ones are deported. Universities are being attacked, scientists are being defunded, our judicial system being perverted to try to indict political enemies. Venezuelan ships are being exploded and their sailors murdered. Journalists are being verbally abused and kicked out of the White House and the Pentagon. And the list goes on and on. The New York editorial board examined how much the US has slid from a democracy to an autocracy. And while they found that the US is far from being a true autocracy like China and Russia, there are 12 signs that our country is going down that road. They include repressing speech and dissent, persecuting political opponents, bypassing the legislature, using the military for domestic control, defying the courts, declaring national emergencies on false pretenses, vilifying marginalized groups, trying to control information in the news media, taking over universities, creating a cult of personality, using power for personal profit, and manipulating the law to stay in power. The current administration checks off all those boxes to one degree or another, and that's deeply troubling. Many people are realizing that one of the aims of these tactics is to silence people, to discourage people's voices from being heard, to turn activists into cynics, to encourage us to tune out the news and simply go about our daily lives. My only hope is that many of us will opt to keep fighting the good fight. When Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air in September, a boycott forced Disney to put him back on the air within 24 hours. 7 million people joined the No Kings rally in October. Voters turned out in droves in elections in Virginia and New Jersey in November. And in December, the Indiana legislature refused to redraw congressional maps. None of these things happened without hard work. I believe the answer is to keep protesting and keep working for candidates of our choice if we want to fight against the tide of autocracy. This sometimes feels to me like fighting a forest with a small bucket of water. But cynicism and complacency are not the answer. For me, the answer lies in our UU values of building a beloved community here on earth based on justice and equity, and to keep fighting so that small bucket turns into a fire hose. I don't want to just duck when those tuna cans come flying. I want to take a stand and keep taking a stand. I believe it's the only way forward.
So once again, good morning. My subject this morning is Universalist minister Clarence Skinner. It's not the psychologist, behaviorist guy, B.F. Skinner. It's not the football wide receiver Quincy Skinner Jr. or the owner of Skinner Fine Arts Auction House. It's about a champion of liberalism, Clarence Skinner, who in the beginning of the 20th century rose to be dean of Crane Theological School, an important Universalist seminary, part of Tufts University. He's an important figure because he presided over the evolution of Universalism from a salvific individual faith to a community and world religion. Universalism in the early American Republic answered the question, am I going to be condemned to hell and be tortured forever after I die? At that time, the Universalist preachers refuted the theologies based on damnation and reinterpreted the Bible to show that Jesus taught God's universal grace. God will save every person, even those whose entire lives seemed demonic. There is no eternal hell. You are loved by God. In the early 20th century, Skinner evolved this into a faith that sees the hell society has created for so many, from the very poor, those with diseases, those in abusive relationships, a hell on earth that is far from God's vision. It became a faith that calls us to work toward a more universally heavenly future. He wrote, "If there is anything which ought to be distinctive of religion, it is a feeling of active relationship between the self and the mystic other better world. There is no reason why this sense of relationship should be confined to a hazy heavenly realm where the soul resides after death. Can we not visualize another better world which is not yet real, but is capable of being brought into reality? The old mysticism was individualistic. This other mysticism would contain a diviner urge and lay upon the believers a sense that there was something great to be done." I'm drawn to study Reverend Skinner because he was an engaged minister. Not a perfect person, but an engaged minister. In New York City, he got out of the church building and worked in the settlement houses. In Lowell, Massachusetts, he set up a weekly forum talk with guest speakers from all sorts of perspectives. And at Crane Theological School, he was remembered by one student who wrote, "He had an uncanny ability of clarifying ideas. Whatever the subject happened to be, he approached it from all sides, analyzed it clearly, and then, without forcing his conclusions, laid it out before the student so that the student might choose what truth was and what course to pursue." This student was quick to add, one was never in doubt as to what Skinner himself thought. Back in April 2024, I gave you all a sermon on Skinner, Universalism, and his ministry. It ended with a number of excerpts from a 1937 book, Liberalism Faces the Future. Back in April 2024, if I remember correctly, Joe Biden was president. The words of Clarence Skinner were perhaps of historical interest. Skinner's book was published as Franco ruled Spain, Mussolini led fascist Italy, and the Chancellor of Germany was none other than Adolf Hitler. Also, Comrade Stalin was in power in the USSR. In 1937, liberalism faced a very uncertain future. His book came from a conference which Skinner co-led in New Hampshire in 1936. The sponsoring organization was called the Leiden International Bureau, was an assembly of Dutch and other Europeans, Canadians, and folks from the USA. As Skinner put it, a group of people in Europe and America who shared a common anxiety over the condition of modern civilization and who hope to foster such ideas and programs as will help to reconstruct society on a sane and progressive foundation. The conference theme was the function of liberalism in a world of authorities. Authorities came from both the right wing and the left wing. They gathered in the USA to talk about the rise of the far right and the far left from the relative safety of the United States. In his introduction, Skinner notes that the radical leftists despise liberals. Indeed, the liberal groups in Russia, liberals who had helped depose the Tsar, were exiled or shot by the Bolsheviks. To the Marxian, liberalism is called a weak and wobbly bourgeoisie program which offers nothing but amiable futility. Back in April 2024, you might have thought that Skinner was writing for his time and not for ours. Today, we might wonder. In Liberalism Faces the Future, Skinner defines his liberalism as a system or attitude which opposes illiberalism. It's not anarchist, it's not extremist. He said, liberalism recognizes the place of authority, but it challenges it and asks why, how come, and by what process. It encourages experimentation and tests both new ideas and old established ways of doing things. Skinner said, liberalism looks forward to sources of new light to break from the darkness. It pries open the mind and surveys the universe for new, perhaps disturbing points of view. It yields to truth and not its own conception of truth. Liberals, he wrote, have been notoriously unwilling to face the ugly facts of sin, cruelty, and defeat, which are also characteristics of the race of Homo not to sapiens. Not only that, Skinner notices that impatience with the slow and rigorous processes of testing truth and the urgent need for immediate decisions have challenged liberalism and in many places crushed it so completely that the free press no longer exists. A person dare not say what they know to be true. Prejudice distorts reality until it is no longer recognizable, and the people are herded like innocent sheep. This past Sunday evening, CBS was ready to show a segment about the detention center called CCOT in El Salvador, where deported men were subjected to torture and assaults. It was ready to air, having been verified and cleared by CBS Legal. It had already been sent to Canada to appear on their network, but for some reason it was pulled in the USA. We don't know why, and perhaps we'll hear more tonight on 60 Minutes. And yet, not so long ago, some liberals were condemning newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post, not for suppressing information, but for expressing non-doctrine opinions, canceling, exiling. That isn't so different from Reverend Clarence Skinner's life experience when he was fired from a Universalist church for being a pacifist. He might have lost his professorship at Crane, but the college dean, his boss, did not cancel his tenure, though he was shunned throughout World War I. After the war, all was forgiven, and soon Skinner became dean of the theological school. In the 1936 conference, he was not a professorial lecturer, but it was a free exchange of ideas. Skinner was challenged by the experiences of those in the audience. His heart grew to new awareness. Liberals, he wrote, have been notoriously unwilling to face the ugly facts of sin, cruelty, and defeat. He wrote, liberalism cannot merely cry horror at communism and fascism without offering a constructive substitute, which is a realistic solution to the problems of modern chaos. If we oppose the tragic curtailment of freedom, which is the characteristic of a totalitarian state, how can we offer like security within a liberal state? Where is the everlasting yes? Society wants positive, constructive truths, elevating and nourishing values, the truths that all might live by. Alas for the person who has never been indignant, but also for the poor soul who's never been anything else. Skinner's book goes deep into details of the problems of the United States, listing things needing fixing with women, children, youth, the poor, sick, handicapped, exploited races, exploited sectarians, groups, industrial workers, scientists, teachers, and more. And he makes an absolute statement that liberalism must work against this full range of injustices. And that's where he lost me. Skinner defines his liberalism simply a system or attitude which opposes illiberalism. Does that make sense to you? Something that opposes illiberalism. As a process, it pries open the mind and surveys the universe for new, perhaps disturbing points of view. Are you willing to listen to disturbing points of view? As a faith, it cultivates an urge and a sense that there is something great to be done. Do you get that sense? And as a framework, liberalism must offer society positive, constructive truths, elevating and nourishing values. There must be pride in liberalism. There must be a yes. I think he was saying that a liberal government perhaps use the democratic process and must provide ability to act quickly, the ability to offer real solutions, and the ability to see the world as it is rather than as we believe, hope, wish it would be, or rather than as we allow the news media to see it. The question Clarence Skinner asked in 1937 can be asked again by us in 2025. Can we work to create a more perfect union? How do we offer hope to those who have been lured in or indoctrinated into systems of oppression? How do we offer awareness, hope, and work that is real? At the end of the book, Skinner returns to his strength, preaching hope and vision. Skinner calls for a new liberalism for the new day, providing a framework of rational ideas and the creative power of spirit. Perhaps that creative power of spirit is love. The mystic urge of Skinner asks, can there not be a social and political mysticism which can call forth an eager faith? Can we not visualize another better world, which is not yet real, but is capable of becoming a reality? The old mysticism was individualistic. This new mysticism would contain a diviner urge and lay upon believers a sense that something great is going to be done. How do we, as Skinner asks, look forward for sources of new light to break upon the darkness? How can we pry open our minds and survey the universe for new, perhaps disturbing points of view? And what do we do then? Skinner says, what is needed is faith. He ends this book with these words, and I adapted them slightly. People of reason and peace must do more than issue manifestos. They must have faith. They cannot leave the action to the people of wrath and to the superstitious. Faith is belief plus. Faith is a leap from fact to beyond fact. It is a drive which makes it possible for a person to accomplish not the impossible, but things that seem to be impossible. A liberal believes in humanity and reason and peace and freedom. What happens in the next 100 years will depend largely to the extent to which liberals keep or lose their nerve. The creative power of the free mind has always reawakened from its lethargy. If darkness again descends upon humankind, as well it may. We have faith that the seeds of a renaissance will lie in some secluded monastery or university library, ready to bloom with the warmth of returning spring. Perhaps I'll end with a quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We have always held to the hope, the belief, and the conviction that there is a better life, a better world beyond the horizon. Our closing hymn, number 318, was written by a Unitarian minister named Samuel Anthony Wright for the Unitarian and Universalist youths at their Continental Convention in 1953-54. That's liberal religious youth. How many of you have heard of liberal religious youth? A couple of you have. It could well have been named liberal religious youth because the Universalists and the Unitarians did not have exactly the same set of beliefs. But as a combined organization, they promised to listen to each other, to learn, and to grow together. Even more important, the words in this hymn are about liberalism, emphasizing understanding, love, and discovery. Listen to them as we sing hymn number 318, We Would Be One. These are words of former Senator Bill Bradley. He said, "I'm in the optimism business. I can't afford to see only the dark side of things. It starts with a set of values, of what you believe about what is possible. There is a common humanity which we all share. I'm betting on our common humanity. Don't underestimate the human spirit. Don't underestimate our common humanity." Amen.